So good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to this early morning presentation of my master's topic. I'm going to be presenting on the potential views in virtual realities and meeting for inviting transformative experiences in people. And specifically, I will be focusing on the overview effect. But first, I want to discuss the current state of the world with you for a minute. So what do we hear on the news? Climate change, icebergs are melting. There's not enough water in different regions of the earth. There is social unrest and instability all across the globe. There's pollution and deforestation. And we're observing all of this news every day. They're kind of thrown at us from different sources, but we always just observe it from the comfort of our own couch most of the time. We kind of don't really feel like it has specifically anything to do with us. We don't feel empowered to be able to take any actions which will address any of those issues, even though each individual can do certain things, but even though we're kind of neglected. Another problem is the rising rates of depression. According to the World Health Organization, depression is the leading cause for life with disability, and their rates have grown by 18% since 2005-2015. So what might be a common problem that could solve these issues? So we experience a lot of socialization, which can be solved if we can have the genuine feeling of connectedness with people around us and with the world and nature. So if we can develop this feeling of connectedness, it will help with our well-being and life satisfaction, and will always help us develop the true genuine relationship with our planet, which will give us the sense of responsibility from the Earth for us to start taking action. And as Marshall McLuhan said, that there are no passengers on spaceship Earth, we're all crew. So how can we encourage people to develop this feeling of connectedness? Sometimes there's an experience like that. So when astronauts see the Earth from outer space, they describe their experience something like Edgar Mitchell did. You develop an instant global consciousness, a people orientation, an intense dissatisfaction with the state of the world and compulsion to do something about it. From out there on the moon, international politics looks so petty. You want to grab a politician by the scruff of the neck and drag him a quarter of a mile out and say, "Look at that, you son of a bitch." So there was the effect of his experience by Edgar Mitchell, but it's shared by a lot of other astronauts. When they were witnessing the overwhelming beauty of our planet, they have this strong, profound emotional experience where they realize how beautiful it is, but also how fragile it is, and how we're all connected as living species united together, and we need to unite to be able to protect our planet. It would be great if we can get more people to have this experience and feel connected to each other and to nature. But it doesn't really seem very sensible to shoot more rockets into space. Probably just the environmental impact of that will destroy our planet faster than we can get together and save it. But maybe there's an alternative solution. How about virtual reality? Virtual reality is known as a technology that can create a sense of presence and give people an experience of being there without actually going there. So we can get everyone an experience of being in space like an astronaut without actually sending them there. Great, problem solved. Thank you very much for your attention. But it doesn't quite seem to be as simple. First of all, the technology of virtual reality is not quite at the same state as depicted in this Black Mirror episode. But not even that. The problem is that we don't actually know enough about the overview effect in other transformative experiences. We don't know what the precursors of it are, and what are different components and triggers, and how exactly does it unfold. So what are other transformative experiences? With transformative experiences that we're describing in this research classified as the profound emotional experience that evolves an individual as a changed person. And it has been described with many different terms in different contexts. And it has sometimes described as pivotal experiences, transcendent, peak experiences. They occur when people are climbing the mountain, reaching Antarctica, near-death experiences, seeing Earth from outer space, psychedelic experiences, meditation, and many others. This is my personal transformative experience of me going on a motorcycle trip down the coast from Vancouver to California, which you can argue was probably a mix of a near-death experience and appreciation of the beauty, but thankfully mostly appreciation of the beauty and the splendor of the landscape, and also experience of observing the redwood trees during that trip would probably have given me the strongest feeling of being a very small person when you're witnessing those giants face to face. So personal experience is great, but it'd be good to have some kind of theory generalized around different transformative experiences. However, for the studying of transformative experiences, we're observing some challenges. Because transformative experiences are rare, so it's difficult to find participants who had those strong experiences, and we cannot have them elucidated on will. They're also fairly private, so it's difficult to imagine a person in a lab coat standing, a person on top of the mountain who's having a strong, profound emotional experience, and the scientist in the lab coat taking notes. And likely just the observer being next to you and observing you is going to interfere with the experience. So most of the records we have based on retrospective measures which are taken with long delays. They're also fairly complex. They describe many different contexts, religious contexts, spiritual contexts, observing nature, psychedelic experiences, sports, arts. So it's difficult to generalize them. There's a lot of things which come into play. And they're also inaccessible for some people due to social, physical reasons who cannot go and have those experiences. Thankfully, VR can actually address, to an extent, some of those problems. So first of all, it's purposefully designed, so we can actually create an experience which is aimed to invite such experiences, so they can be invited on will by the designer of the VR experience. They also have this affordance to create immersion, meaning that the person in VR can have a private experience of being there while it can still be observed by scientists outside of VR space without interfering with his personal experience. And they also provide a controllable and replicable environment where we can actually tear apart the different stages and triggers. And it provides a sense of presence, so we can give people an experience that otherwise wouldn't have been accessible to them, and also the affordability of technology has been growing in recent years, so eventually this experience can be brought to a larger public. So now that we know that there is a chance that VR can be used for inviting transformative experience, here are research questions. Can VR actually be a medium for inviting transformative experience to happen for people? First of all, we need to understand how would we go about designing such an experience in VR. And once we did, how would we know if we have succeeded and that the person actually had a version of a transformative experience? So to answer this question, first of all, we look at the literature and different records we have about overview effect and other forms of transformative experience. And from that, we derive design guidelines for designing of the experience and evaluation guidelines which we can use in order to assess whether experiences have actually happened and to what degree. And we also develop a framework of transformative experience which can allow us to understand this phenomenon as a phenomenon unfolding in time through different stages rather than looking at it introspectively years after. And then we're going to prototype our experience based on those guidelines. And finally, we're going to evaluate it with the use of the guidelines, with actual participants, and we'll try to understand what is it like to be in a VR experience that was designed to be in a transformative VR experience. What are the components of the experience people will have? First, I'm going to describe the transformative framework that we have proposed that allows us to separate the progression through experience in 3 different stages. So for the transformative experience that we're interested in, we consider in the first stage to start from a novel perceptual experience with an emotional reaction elicited immediately from experience, which is normally a new perspective on some kind of intellectually familiar concept that then doesn't necessarily fit with the existing worldview of a person. So if it doesn't fit with the existing worldview, then the person experiencing that will have the opportunity of either rejecting the experience, ignoring, considering it to be an illusion, or it can accommodate it according to the transformative experience framework that will lead to the change of their worldview that now encompasses this new information. And then if the worldview is changed and the behavior that the person is regularly performing is in conflict with each other, then through the cognitive dissonance theory, that will hopefully lead to the change of their behavior to match their new worldview. So let's look again at the overview effect. So according to Frank White, who analyzed a lot of interviews with astronauts, there are 3 main components of the overview effect. First is the overwhelming sense of awe when experiencing the beauty of our planet. Then it's an increased sense of connectedness to nature and all the other living species on Earth, and an increased sense of responsibility for our environment. So now we can put all of those components into the transformative framework. So in the first stage of perceptual experience, we're going to be looking for this transformative emotion of awe, which can be measured through the measure of goosebumps. We can observe the skin people and see if they're experiencing goosebumps, which are a good indicator of awe. For the cognitive shift, we will be looking to see an increased connectedness between self and nature, and we used an implicit association test that uses direction times where you categorize words in left and right categories with your left and right fingers, and those categories can be congruent or incongruent, and so based on the direction time, we can see how closely you associate yourself with nature, always alternative built environments. And for behavioral change, we ideally would like to be able to observe some behaviors that will represent your care for the environment, but didn't manage to get to that during my master's, so that will be left open for my PhD. So first thing first, as we see the phenomenon going through those three stages, we will need to focus on the first stage first, as we wouldn't expect to progress further if we haven't reached the first one. So our main focus is achieving the emotion of awe. The emotion of awe is normally experienced when one is witnessing the vast beauty of nature or anything else that overwhelms them, and then that leads to the need for accommodation. Here in British Columbia, you might be familiar with this feeling when you go up in the mountain and you reach the top of the ridge and you see all of the world in front of you, and you have this kind of overwhelming feeling inside you, which is a mix of excitement and peacefulness, and then you kind of take a moment to just breathe and take it in and just absorb and accommodate this experience. So using that inspiration, we have designed the awe-inspiring wellness environment that takes the participant on a journey that starts in the forest, through the lake, into space. And I'm going to show you a video that describes it.
The awe-inspiring wellness environment. The experience begins with the immersant entering a pre-VR physical mixed reality environment that helps them become relaxed and open to the experience ahead. After approximately 10 minutes in pre-VR, the immersant sits in a hands-free interface called the limbic chair. This interface allows for intuitive navigation in our virtual environment. The immersant wears a VR headset and noise-canceling headphones for full immersion. The next stage finds the immersant in a camping site in the forest. This stage encourages the immersant to freely explore and interact with a playful sprite creature who acts as their companion and guide. Because the lower body drives this interface, they don't have to worry about buttons on a hand controller that can distract from their immersive experience. Instead, they simply lean in the direction that they wish to go. Entering the lake requires a leap of faith. The water environment is calming with creatures present that incite curiosity. A portal into space emerges, and the immersant is guided by the sprite through the nebulas to an epic view of our planet in a grand climax. They return back to the campsite where it is now daytime, and the virtual experience ends. To address usability concerns around navigation, we built upon early prototypes that used a leaning paradigm with positional tracking, as seen here. For evaluation, we replay a recording of the immersant's experience to identify the moment-to-moment UX and emotional features of our system. We help re-immerse them in the experience again, and then we conduct in-depth explorations of moments of interest. Biosensors also tell us a lot about their experience. We record the presence of chills and goosebumps on the skin, which is an indication of awe, and we record respiration rates. In this next prototype, respiration, the act of breathing in and out, can control the movement of jellyfish in the lake. Immersants might enjoy the playful interaction and the introspective awareness that this allows.
So this is all. And for the interest of time, I'm only going to be able to go through just a couple results and design guidelines. So first, based on what we know about the experience of the overview effect, biostudents, we know that it's a very private experience in the moment when it happens, and it only becomes public when they come back on earth and discuss it. So we consider it to be important to design a safe space for people. So we designed a physical tent where participants will go in and have their virtual experience inside this tent, so they can feel like they're in a safe, private environment where they can have a strong emotional experience. And then we also know that connection for astronauts usually starts small and then it expands to the whole planet. So they will be describing how they're looking at Earth and they see in their hometown, they see in Houston, and they're feeling connected to that, and then they're feeling connected to their state and the country, and then eventually it grows to this overwhelming feeling of connection to the whole planet. So for that, we started our experience from the camping site, which we thought would be familiar to a lot of participants. And we also introduced this sprite creature, which is an animated particle system that's meant to be a guide that can create the sense of connection with you because it takes you through the experience step by step. And another guidelines ahead, so that it might be important to have some initial fear in the experience. Due to the nature of the overview effect, because it happens during a space flight, it naturally starts from you being inside this massive machine with a bunch of explosives shooting you out into the sky, which is a very terrifying experience for anyone. And it's not clear whether it's a necessarily important precursor for the overview effect, but it might be. So we decided we will introduce a little bit of initial fear. But because for most people, experience of being in a rocket is not very familiar, we decided to use something which most people have experienced, which can provide a more visceral reaction. So we had participants take the leap of faith into the dark lake in the middle of the night. So here are some study details. Overall, 34 participants have experienced ORA, but here I'll be reporting just on the most recent, most formal study where we had 15 participants. Only 13 of them have actually finished the experience because 2 of them had cyber sickness and had to retreat. For the measures, we used the goosebump camera, bliss association test, and 2 types of phenomenological interviews. So you've seen in the video, acute recall and microphenomenology. And comparing to the video, this study was done with swivel chair being in the interface, and there is no bioresponsive elements or biosensors. So first I'm going to discuss our quantitative results. Goosebumps. We got 1 shiver. It's 1 experience of shiver, and I will show you how it happened. So this is what the person is seeing in her HMD. And then when the sun comes out, you can see how the hair moves a little bit. And most notably, you can see how micromuscles just under the surface of the skin have like a wavy motion. And you can see it a little bit better with a 200 speed wave of muscles under the skin. So that's our shiver. For the implicit association test, 69% of our participants had a strong and moderate connection between self and nature. The average score between all of the participants was 0.46. The score ranges from -2 and 2. And for comparison, we can look at the study by Schultz and Tabasco, who had a baseline and 0.4 was the undergraduate students, and then they also did a study with people living in a park, where their score was 0.45. So we can possibly speculate that our experience might be something similar to going through the park rather than just being in a classroom. But they're not really fully comparable. Now I can move on to the qualitative results. There's a lot of interesting rich data. Leaving the usability issues aside, here are the total counts of different participants who have been coded with each one of those themes. We were very excited to see some cognitive shifts. We call them mini shifts. They probably were not very strong, but we still saw a few of them, but less than everything else. And there's a lot of emotional affect type of reports and bodily sensations. And probably the individual background and novelty and familiarity was the most prominent one, which all of the participants have been discussing multiple times through their interviews. So again, I'm only going to go through a few of them in details. So let's go look back again on the guidelines that we have discussed. So we were hoping to create the privacy and safety with the use of tent. Here's participant describing the beginning of the experience. I felt that the whole setup of the tent and what I saw here, as the tent was really like, I felt safe. I felt the tent provided a safe starting point for me. Possibly succeeded. Then for the connection, we introduced the sprite creature. Its movement is really playful. It reminds me of Disney. So it's something that's really familiar because it moves like Tinkerbell. And you know that it's a trustworthy source. You know that you're supposed to follow it. And the quote. At first curiosity, and then knowing that, again, it felt safe to follow it. You know it's a friend. The light was a friend, yeah. Sprite was successfully able to introduce itself as a friend and establish some connection. And we also saw a similar type of connection established with a particular city when moving around the model of the Earth. I have a colleague who's working in Colombia right now, so I'm putting real people I know. There's a few participants who try to make these connections with different places on the model of the Earth that I saw first, much like astronauts would do. At the moment of fear, the jump into the lake was fairly successful of introducing an emotional response, which was a very physical response to quite a few number of participants who were surprised by that themselves. I felt a shock. I felt like I was choked. That surprised me. It wasn't just like, oh, that was kind of weird. It did feel like someone poked me or something. I felt an actual slap to myself, tension that I wasn't expecting. So, another participant. I noticed myself clenching my hands. I'm not comfortable. I'm just going to wait it out until it goes away. Interestingly enough, this response of fear was often followed by the sense of release from the fear that led to the experience that we were not specifically expecting, but were very excited received. It led to some people to report that they have experience in feeling weightless, floating. So here a participant describes the moment of just reaching the lake after jumping in. He had this feeling of tension, and then once he reached the lake, he realized that he can just relax and take it all in. That's weird because on the ground, after the transition, I'm super conscious of how I'm sitting in a chair and kind of leaning forward. It's feeling a little awkward. But in that second, I didn't feel that. And that's what I kind of loved too, is how I had no idea you could reproduce that. Give that sense that you're weightless. Suddenly, I wasn't conscious of my body pressing into the earth. Different moment of release from fear was also described by a different participant who was clenching her hands through the lake and then to reach the transition into space. When I was in the water, I felt like I wasn't in control. I was weighted down. Like if I had weights around my ankles, whereas when I was transitioning into the sky, it felt like the opposite. The weights were off the ankles. You're weightless. So, and now I'm going to also quickly look through the Transformative Framework and how our quotes fit in there. So there are several number of reports like that. I remember thinking of the Pacific Ocean is so big, and for a while I thought that I'm not seeing things correctly, which is funny because I know that it's huge, but it was so vast. And to see it in that perspective, what was very unique for me. Interestingly enough, this participant actually works in aquariums, so she works with ocean on a daily basis. So this probably describes, well, it's clearly the first stage of the experiencing the vastness in a new perspective. And that can lead to the sense of awe. It's a different quote. Transition from the bottom of the water into the spacescape. And it's sort of the initial moment when you look at it holistically and you see everything is involved in it. Here, the participant was visually experiencing the connectedness of everything in our universe. And last quote. When you go around and see that Brazil is so close to Florida, you know politically things are so far away. The need for people to figure out the environmental scientists, because it's affecting everybody. But this is the artificial lines that seem to be so unhelpful. What is the service it is to see map is flat? Things look so much further apart than they actually are. If we're going to problem solve bigger things, this flat political map is just not going to get us there. So this is not quite the behavioral change because they're not observing behavior, but it's likely describing the experience of the cognitive dissonance of what the participant was seeing and feeling and what she knows about the state of the world and what people do. We can see that we only had one participant who has had records which fall anywhere within this part of the framework, and had a few more within the cognitive shift part, and had way more within the perceptual experience part, which just supports this anticipation we had that we have to design step by step, and first we can achieve the first stage, and then we can help people facilitate the transition between the further stages. So a quick summary of all of the results. So goosebumps and shivers didn't really show us terribly promising results. We only had one shiver. Is even possible that that shiver was more of a fear response rather than awe response, because that participant in her interviews was describing feeling afraid, even though fear is a component of awe as well, so we would have required to take a more in-depth interviews with her to actually tear those two experiences apart. This was likely due to some usability issues with our prototype and the quality of the models, but it's also possible that the actual design of the camera was inhibiting the observation of goosebumps, because it was in close contact with the skin around the place where we were hoping to see the goosebumps, which is shown sometimes to inhibit occurrence of goosebumps in that particular area, while you can see them on the other hand and neck. EAC measure showed that our participants were mostly moderately connected with nature, which goes along with the interview data, which showed similar results. Even though we see different components of awe and connectedness within our interview data, we probably still haven't seen any profound transformative experiences happening or really strong, powerful, emotional, or inspiring experiences. But there's some hope. And interviews provided a lot of rich details about participants' experience and different effects of different components of the design on the experience, and you can read about it in my thesis. Interested. So here's some methodological contributions that come out of that research. Acute recall and microphonological interviews were very successful in providing deep, detailed record of participants' experience. That was much better than the earlier open-ended type of interviews that we used in their first few prototypes. It's important to combine quantitative and qualitative methods to disaggregate the data between each other. And we need to iterate on the goosebump camera. Now the design contributions. Personal background was probably one of the most important things, which was predicting how people will experience our installation. A lot of it was coming out as a surprise to us, because we couldn't have predicted it in advance before having those participants. Some participants were cliff jumpers, they were very excited of going into the lake. Some participants had an experience of getting lost in the woods when they were kids, so they were very scared in our camping spot, which we were trying to create as a safe environment. There was the largest predictor, and also being in the study set up certain expectations as well. Sense of agency and self-relevance is very important to the design. At the moment when the self-relevancy was lost, participants got completely disconnected. They felt like they were watching a movie and the screen very close to their eyes. They were not involved. And documenting design decisions and the related expected outcomes we're expecting from those decisions through the process of the design is very important to be able to test those design decisions as a hypothesis later on in testing, and not retrospectively try to go back in your thoughts and not end up accidentally using the results which have just come out as a hypothesis that you're trying to test with the results that have just come out. And it's very exciting to see that inducing the fear and the release from it can provide an easier way of creating the feeling of weightlessness for participants without using the flotation tanks and big complicated stuff with harnesses that some other people are trying. Okay, and so for the research contributions, you can see that there are...
I switched to Stepanova because
Can you hear us okay, Andrea?
yes.
Okay, good.
Okay. contribution, the researchers have showed that VR could potentially be used as an effective medium creating effective experience, which elicits at least some components of awe in some participants. We can also see that the virtual transformative experience might be a new type of the phenomenon that is different from the transformative experience that we have been chasing originally. And so we need to do more research in studying this specific type of experiences in a deep phenomenological way, as it creates new affordances and relations. And transformative framework can be used as a useful tool for assessing how the transformative experience has been unfolding and to which stage we were able to get and what is the important stage we need to focus on for the next prototype to facilitate participants moving further. I wanted to thank everyone involved in this project. There's been a lot of people who have been taking care of different components of it. It's a really big group effort. So here's a quick summary of contributions. We have extended the theoretical framework describing the designing of transformative experiences that will help us design and understand them. We used the research-based design process of using literature review in combination with artistic intuitions to create an immersive installation. We used an iterative design process to prototype the VR experience as well as the evaluation methods, and we combined the various quantitative research methods to discuss it. And lastly, I just want to discuss my plan for my PhD. So further on, we would need to iterate more on the design, implement and test more of the guidelines. We would like to use a combination of phenomenological interviews with biosensors in a process similar to neurophenomenology to create a predictive model of different transformative motions and states by aligning these two different types of data. We'll want to extend the transformative framework to include individual variables and external influence that might come into play. We'll also focus on directly facilitating the transition stages, the accommodation and cognitive dissonance, and we'll like to test the biosensors as an interaction component as well. Thank you very much.